Hello and welcome to Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. I am your host, JP John Paz from the two-man power trip of wrestling. And of course, joining me is the star of the show, the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, former NWA Florida World Heavyweight Champion, and of course, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in their history of professional wrestling, the man behind WCW's success, the Games Master, the Taskmaster, the devil himself, Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
Wonderful, John. Thank you very much for the great introduction. And this is going to be interesting to go talk about. And you and I were talking off camera that wrestling seems to be starting to pop up and people starting to come back, which surprised me, that they're throwing complete caution to the wind. And it's nice to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a hell of a house there. They were on, and they got some very good talent. There's some great young talent out there. And, I hear from my generation, that all they can do is flip flop and fly. And that's not truth. I saw Blood Hunter work with Sabu. And what it reminded me of about a little bit, it was about a guy we're going to talk about today, Vader. Blood Hunter is an intense individual, and he's sharp in the ring. And it was very, very, I thought it was a home run for the first time they did a pay-per-view. I saw just this morning where Mike Tyson's going to fight Lennox Lewis. Did you see that?
Mm-mm. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Now, it's probably under the same rules he had with Roy Jones Jr., but, hey, if people are willing to see Mike put on I paid for the one. Well, I didn't pay for it. My friend paid for it. I was at his house. We watched the fight, So this should be interesting. I believe these fights that we're talking about, something's going to happen where either somebody doesn't do business or they do it so well it looks so good or something, because this could be a thing. And I'm asking you your opinion, John. I don't think you can get a lot out of it unless there got to be something, after the fourth or fifth one that shocks the people.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer they can keep going back. I mean, Tyson's still a draw, but they obviously going to have to go back to his well. Jake Paul to fight with Ben Askren seemed a little bit like a work. So I don't know how many more of those people are going to take if they're not legit fights. But I don't know. We'll see. Right now they're popular, but let's see. I don't know how many legs that they have.
Right. Exactly.
Did you see the Ben Askren Jake Paul fight, by the way?
I saw the highlights of it. Yeah.
Did you think there was a little bit of or maybe even a work shoot there?
I think it was a complete work. I mean, the guy, what's his name?
Askren, yeah.
Yeah. He had a smile on his face after it was over, like he had just, graduated from college.
Yeah.
He did. He got a big check, so I didn't think much. And, but whatever they're doing, think about this. There was no television. There was no setup, really, right? They just threw that together and drew. I've heard multiple different figures. What's the truest one you think you've heard?
I heard 1.5 million, then I heard 1.1 million or something like that. But it was basically between 1 and 1.5 is what I heard, what the draw was.
People, that's buys, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. That's what I heard too. So that's going to translate into a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. They're killing it. And it was funny too with Askren's wife. She pat him on the chest. She goes, good job. And he's smiling and laughing as they're walking to the back. I was like, usually after you get knocked out, your wife is usually upset. And she's laughing with him and stuff.
Yeah.
It was a good one though. It was a good work, I think.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to focus in on a WCW Slamboree 1995, back on May 21st, 95 in St. Petersburg, Florida at the Bayfront Arena, one of your favorite places. 7,000 people were there at the pay-per-view. The buys were around 110,000. And of course, this is a Legends reunion. You do love the Bayfront Arena, don't you?
Yeah, I think they've torn it down, John, but it was a great building. When the tap office was in existence, that ran once a month, sometimes once every 3 weeks, but it was for the blow off. It's funny. Uh, Florida territory didn't have a Saturday night town. We went back to every week, like we went every Monday to West Palm, Sunday to Orlando. We didn't have a Saturday night town. We had St. Pete, the Bayfront. We had Sarasota. We had Lakeland, and then we had Daytona Beach. So we had a big show every Saturday in a different building. Yeah.
Wow, nice. Pretty interesting. Probably packed house, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned this many times that Eddie set the table years prior, and then Jack Briscoe came, and then it became Dusty's place. And Dusty was, I don't think as time goes by, people remember what a huge draw Dusty was. I mean, not just in Florida. He would go out to Madison Square Garden, and him and Billy Graham would draw huge houses. He'd go to Houston, he'd go to Kansas City. We even ran San Francisco for a while out of Florida, and Dusty was big there. So that's before national TV. Dusty was a huge, huge star. So they had the plate was set for them to come in and always do good business in Florida.
Now, interesting thing about the pay-per-view, Shivani is not there. So Bischoff fills in and does commentary. Shivani, I guess, was having neck surgery at the time. Is that what was going on? He kind of had to take some time off.
Yeah, I don't know if that was before. I'm thinking he had the surgery done, and it took Tony a while to get over that. It isn't like how clean a neck surgery is today. Tony had some little complications.
So obviously Bishop just an easy fill-in. Obviously he's running things, but easy fill-in because he's a experienced commentator in his own right? Just easy to plug him in.
Exactly. Eric knew what was going on, that's for sure.
So the Slamboree Legends reunion, of course, has a Hall of Fame attached to it, which was always very nice and very cool. Always like that. So in this event, Wahoo McDaniel, Angelo Poffo, Terry Funk, Antonio Inoki, Dusty Rhodes, Gordon Soley, and Big John Studd were inducted into the WCW Hall of Fame during the show. That's pretty awesome. If you just kind of think about it and think about those names, pretty good star power.
Very good. I mean, just what you just said, think about those names. Especially there, Dusty and Terry, Gordon, Stud had come in there, Tony Inoki was probably the biggest, next to Ricky Dozan, probably the biggest star in the history of Japan. And I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful way to start. Angelo Poffo, too. People forget that Angelo Poffo was a huge star on the first wave of national TV. He was the U.S. champion, which was just a step down from being the world heavyweight champion. I mean, Buddy Rogers, that's how he got the title shot, because he was the U.S. champion.
As far as a Hall of Fame in WCW, did WCW have any plans on doing more with it? I know it was kind of an annual tradition at Slamboree the last few years. Before that, they always had the Legends reunion. Was there any plan on actually doing something for the Hall of Fame?
I think in the back of everybody's mind, that would have been nice, but feasibility wise to get it passed, because you'd have to go to the North Tower, and not only did they not know who those wrestlers were, or wrestler personalities were that you just mentioned, they hardly knew who was working for them. You know what I mean? So they had no love of the history of wrestling business. So as a physical builder, no, maybe they were going to allow us to do it once a year, but they weren't going to put any time or effort into it.
I gotcha. It's just cool that they had it and recognize those people, recognize those names, give them the plaque, get them the little pop stuff. It's just always cool. And obviously WWE does the same thing now today.
Right, right.
As far as Angelo Poffo, was that putting him in the Hall of Fame for what was going to happen later on in the show? Was that a little tease, or was that legit? Like, we want to show support for the Macho Man, want to show support for Angelo. Let's get him in.
Yeah, it was. Randy was very close to his father, very, very close, and he didn't have to ask much, but I know that he asked for his father to go in. So of course, he deserved it, but with Randy's backing, it got in there quickly. There was no second thought about it.
With Angelo Poffo, we will be hearing from him later on in the show because some big storyline going to be happening in the main event with him, Macho, and Rick. But as far as the main event is concerned, which happened right before the pay-per-view, the first matchup was the Blue Bloods, Lord Steven Regal and Earl Robert Eaton, which was a great Bobby Eaton funny gimmick because it didn't fit him at all, but it was funny to have him part of that. They defeat Los Especialates. I guess there's, I don't even know who's under the mask, but it's two Spanish gimmicks or Mexican gimmicks. Basically 1 minute match. The Blue Bloods get the victory. What do you think about Earl Robert Eaton?
Oh, fabulous. And like you said, so miscast. It reminded me of W.C. Fields. He was always miscast in his movies. Yes.
Yep.
So Bobby did a hell of a job. Bobby was he got the most out of the least. He was not a good talker, not at all, but this one he pulled off terrifically. And it gave some levity to the show, but Bobby and Regal could wrestle, and they were great psychologists. So it was a perfect match, I think.
And those backstage segments and the segments that they had on Saturday night were always fun, with him trying to go from being like the Alabama boy to the English blue blood, and Regal trying to teach him all about, manners and things like that. It was very, very funny. And it was like, what, like, why is he trying to do this? I know Eaton is a great wrestler, but why is he trying to turn him into this blue blood? Very funny stuff.
Yeah, very funny. And Regal showed his, Regal's a very talented guy, and Regal got to show his side of, that we didn't get to see much. We saw him as this dour, no nonsense, take no prisoners English wrestler, where we got to see a bit of a personality here. I thought it was beautifully done.
And with Regal and Eaton, any big plans for them as far as the tag team division?
I think they could have had huge plans for them, but there is something that wasn't quite connecting, not because of ability, but I'm not sure. Sometimes, personality, and you're dealing with a corporation. They didn't seem, not the guys, but the executives didn't seem to understand how good these guys were. You get my drift?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this was for me anyway, it was, let's keep Bobby busy. He deserves to be working, but more than that, he deserves a job. So I don't want any repercussions where someone says to me, well, he's not working. Bobby's doing anything he can to stay in the position. And Bobby rightfully so deserved it. Why the WWF or E didn't hire Bobby for a trainer is beyond me.
Very weird. Like they had him down in Deep South, but as the story goes, I guess they locked him out or he couldn't get in. Like one day, like it was very strange, kind of the way they handled that, and didn't really have him down there as a full time trainer, which was nuts.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's
the
actually,
low,
go ahead.
I was going to say, and the Los Especialistas was Ricky Santana and Fidel Sierra, who really the Barrio brothers at that time, but based just under the masks, and it is what it is. But with Eaton, I don't know, always kind of confused. Like, man, this guy might be the greatest worker of all time, or at least up there, or at least in consideration. And WWE didn't know how to use him as a trainer. Weird.
Yeah. And like you said, not many people have said that, JP. But Bobby's up there with some of the greatest performers of all times. I mean, to me, he's up there, the top 10 of all times, all eras, too.
Totally agree. You knew you were going to have a great match when he was involved.
Yep.
Absolutely. The next matchup, Steve Austin defeats Eddie Ajaki in about 1 minute. What's going on with Steve Austin here? We're in 1995, and he's still kind of on main event, not doing much.
Well, again, how long he's been over now? 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't worked much before then. He was learning, and the thing was, everybody saw the potential in him. But, one of the things that WCW and WWF at the time did, sometimes it pushed the guy way too soon and he burnt out. With Austin, I think the company saw what they had and they were going to try to make sure there was no mistakes. There was no backlash. So I think he was in the right spot during that period. Because,
Like
when we say Steve Austin, we just think of Stone Cold. Usually we don't know that he's going to grow into that. He's still stunning Steve Austin. And there was a big difference between stunning Steve Austin and Stone Cold Austin.
But in '94, he's a U.S. champ. He had feuded with Steamboat for a while. He had feuded with Great Muta. He was absolutely kind of tearing it up with a lot of guys. And then all of a sudden, the Hogan guys come in, and he's pushed off to the side.
I've said this before. He was one of the people that the glass ceiling came down on his head. He wasn't one of them. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't. He had that no working arrangement with Hogan before this. I don't think he ever met him. We've mentioned before, Hogan likes to be comfortable around the people he works with. He likes to know them. And maybe that's why when it was his turn that Austin wouldn't work with Hogan in New York, right?
Right. Absolutely. I guarantee that was the case. With Austin at this point, did he ever come up to you and say, because the story goes that he wanted to work with Hogan and Hogan nixed it, but did he ever go up to you and say, hey, can you squeeze me into something with the Hulkster?
No, I don't think so. And I'm sure Steve is a man's man. He would have wanted to Hogan first. And that's the kind of guy he is. And if that's why I'm saying is years later, if Hogan was the one that said, oh, yeah, no, not today, kid. Payback can be a bitch, John.
Mm-hmm. Actually ended up hurting Austin more because they gave Hogan the Rock and then they gave him the world title after that, and a lot of good feuds, and then Austin ended up walking out, so it almost hurt Austin in the end that he didn't want to work with Hogan.
We have such high regard for Austin's performances, and I do too. I think very few people have ever even come close to being over like he has been over. He might have been, this was after the neck problem too, right? With Austin.
Yep.
He might not have wanted to tarnish his legacy because you have to work with Hulk in a different way. I don't see Hulk going off his feet so gingerly and getting punched the way Austin works, with those rapid punches and everything's quick movement
Yep.
when he's up. Maybe that's another thing he was thinking about.
Interesting that those two somehow they were in the same place at the same time for 2 years, never rest. Crazy, or well, over a year or so. But anyway, the next match, Sergeant Craig Pittman defeats one of your all-time favorites, Mark Starr, in submission in about 2 minutes. Just a normal, just quick. Let's get Pittman over match.
Yeah. And the other thing was, we picked Mark because he was a Florida boy. He was halfway over in Florida when it was a territory. So rather than Pittman beating a non entity from Florida, he got that rub from Mark. Believe it or not, that helped him.
Nice. I like that. The next matchup was actually a quarterfinal match for the WCW United States Championship. Ming defeats Flying Brian Pillman. Following the match, Road Warrior Hawk came down to confront Ming. This led to the announcement that the two will be facing later on the actual pay-per-view. With Ming defeating Pillman there, do you think the main event was the right spot for a U.S. title quarterfinal match, or you were okay with it because it was leading to a Ming match on the pay-per-view?
Yeah, it was okay with me because it was the hook too, that they didn't expect that. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was all right with me there.
Now, Pillman is just Flying Brian at this point. This is kind of right before he starts developing into what would eventually be the loose cannon. Did any plans here for Pillman? I mean, it's only basically a 5-minute loss to Ming on the pre-show. So, any big plans here for Pillman, or he's just kind of floating along?
I think that Pillman was putting this all together because I remember him and I having a little bit of a meeting one day and him saying, I got an idea for my character, but I want to keep it under my vest until I get it worked out in my head exactly. So he put a lot of time into developing this loose cannon. And he had a friend too that played football or owned a gym or something that was very close, that was giving him books on psychology. So Brian dove deeply into this. And I liked that what he said, I'm developing this character. I don't want to talk about it until I have it. So it was, he put a lot of time and effort into it, and obviously it worked.
Did he like you and trust you a lot with stuff, or were you guys kind of, not really
Oh, we were
gelling?
friends. I think Brian and I were friends. We got along. We had a mutual friend, Mike Graham, and him were very close. Mike and I had been tag team partners as kids. Mike was his biggest booster. He said this kid's going to draw a lot of money. And he was always protective of Brian. If someone said, hey, he's going to get beat when we were doing Saturday Night Live, not Saturday Night Live, but Saturday night, Mike would come and say, nah, let's sit down. And I saw Mike manipulate Brian from getting Brian beat to Brian going over strong. So Brian did have people, and Ric Flair was a big Brian proponent when he first started. So there were a lot, and everybody liked Brian. Uh, you know, he was a good guy. He was fun in the dressing room. He had a great personality. I mean, he looked like a star. He was just terrific.
Ex football player. Flair loves those ex football players, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the actual pay-per-view itself starts off with the Nasty Boys, Brian Knobbs and Jerry Saggs, defeating the Harlem Heat of Booker T and Stevie Ray for the WCW World Tag Team Championships in about 11 minutes. Nice way to start the show, right? Having a title change.
Yeah, I think, it gives them a big pop. The other thing that people don't understand, the Nasty Boys really started in Florida when Dusty had Turnbuckle Wrestling. So they were over in Florida. So again, I think they would have the pop they got was bigger than if they had never been seen in Florida except occasionally. They were part of the structure of Dusty's company. So I think it was the right thing to do to start the show off and gave it a nice pop and a nice feel.
Gotta love that. Nasty Boys winning it, and then not the hometown, obviously Allentown, PA, used as hometown, but basically their home base there in Florida.
Right, right. To this day, they are. Yeah.
What do you think about starting the show with a title change? Is that always good? Always good way to start the crowd off hot?
I don't think it's always good. Like I've said to you before, I think the worst thing you can do is fall into patterns. But once in a while, it pops the crowd. It's an easy way to pop them, especially if you got two teams that can perform like those guys can. And I'll tell you something about Harlem Heat. Harlem Heat could get the best out of the Nasty Boys, even better than the Steiners. The Harlem Heat made them dig.
Absolutely, yes. I feel like also you guys were starting to try to build up the tag team division here. I mean, you got the Nasty Boys, obviously Harlem Heat, but also you're trying to build up the Blue Bloods. So it feels like you're trying to rebuild and really kind of hone this tag team division.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I think is sort of lost in wrestling today is I remember when every territory. Now, here's the thing. People can say, well, that's in the old days. They were successful at this. So when I broke in, there was 37 companies that all were doing this. So that doesn't mean everything that those days were right. But if everybody was doing it, there must have been a reason. You know, when you were a kid, was Bruno champion, John?
No, Backlund was actually when I was, and then
Okay,
Hogan
okay, so
with Sheiky
Backlund.
Baby in between.
Okay, so Backlund. You went to see Backlund was in the main event. Then it was the World Tag Team. Then usually it was a special attraction. Then it was the guy they were building up to wrestle Backlund, or they would flip flop the special attraction match with the guy that was going to wrestle Backlund. If you have something that says world on it, you got to make it important. And that's what they used to do. The World Tag Team Champions were very important. It was a great slot to have. But as time went on, the tag teams kind of just dissolved. And it's hit or miss. They throw guys together. I mean, when I first broke into the business, there were guys that traveled all over the country as teams. And people would say, oh, you see here, the assassins are coming in for a couple of weeks. Boy, we'll draw some money. I mean, it was like I equated to the junior heavyweight champion at the time coming in, like Danny Hodge. It was respected, you know what I mean? And then the people thought they were getting something extra on the show.
Yep. And then, of course, after this match, the Blue Bloods do come out. They stare down the new champions, kind of cementing their place or wanting a title shot. So a little bit of a build there and kind of putting them in a feud, not a feud, but in the picture, if you will. Put them in the
Right,
title hunt.
right. Throw them in the hunt. Right, exactly.
So the next match is probably going to be your favorite match of the evening. You, yourself, Kevin Sullivan, defeat the man with no name, aka Brudi, aka the Butcher, aka the Zodiac, aka the Booty Man, a.k.a. Brutus the Bar Beefcake, in 5 minutes. What do you think about this? The man with no name.
It got us into the problem, when they called him the butcher,
Because of Abdullah.
Yeah, he sued them and won. So, Brutus, I got to give Brutus this. He tried his hardest, okay? I know I'm going to get criticized for this. But you can't ask anybody to try any harder than they can. He was protected by Hulk. We all know that. Would anybody turn down that protection?
No.
So, did he ever take advantage of it? I'm sure he did. But they were close, they were childhood friends. They started together. They were actually the Hogan brothers for a while. They went to Portland together, Pensacola, everywhere together. Was Brutus capable of having a match? Yes. I never saw him not work hard, but that doesn't mean, no matter how hard he worked, that he had ever had the best match on the card. But the other thing that cemented him with Hogan, during Hogan's first run when he was red hot, they went on a tour, a West Coast tour, where they did San Francisco, Sacramento, and LA. It was either 3 or 4 towns in California, and they sold every one of them out. And Hogan thought Brutus did it. Well, he was selling out all over with everybody. But that gave Hulk the wherewithal to fall back and say, see, he sold out. I sold out with him.
Yep.
And he bring that up to me, only 3 or 4 times I ever worked with Brutus, we had complete sellouts. It's kind of hard to argue when a guy is, leans to his, that's a very close friendship. And here's the thing, a lot of people that aren't in the wrestling business say, oh, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. I think it's very admirable to be a friend of somebody and watch out because he did something for you when you first started. As long as he can work, it's like I kept Bobby Eaton a job, I kept Bob a job, I kept Ming a job because those guys could work. They never got in the position that Brutus did, but I understand why Hogan was so protective of Brutus. And the other thing about Brutus is sometimes when he was in the NWO, name me 3 other guys in the business that looked as good as him.
Oh, when he was a disciple, he was jacked to the 9th. He was huge.
Right. So he didn't rest on his laurels. He tried his hardest. That's what I'm getting at.
And it's not like he was a small guy anyway. I mean, he was big before that. He got cut into a tremendous shape. It's one of those things. It's like, wow, Brutus Beefcake was big, but the disciple, this guy's a monster.
Yeah, when he was the disciple, and I would see. I was living in Daytona and the Keys at the same time. I had 2 places, but I would go over to Tampa once in a while for meetings. And Brutus and Hogan go to Hulk's beach house, and Brutus was so strict on his diet. I remember him eating like 4 hamburgers, not a bread, not a pretzel, nothing, just meat. And, he worked out very hard. Plus, Hulk liked that because he pushed Hulk to work hard. Do you get what I'm saying, John?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there was a lot of good things that he brought to the table that people outside of the dressing room can knock him all they want. But if I look at it now, Brutus was an intricate part for me to keep Hogan somewhat from going off the page. Because I could have a conversation with Brutus and say, and wasn't Jimmy the conversation with, because Brutus saw the world as what it was, not just bubblegum and roses. And I would say, brother, I think this needs to be done, or what do you think about Hulk doing this? And he knew that I had the business that I wanted it to work for everybody. And knowing that if I got to Brutus that maybe Hulk needed to lie down or solve for this guy, make this guy, didn't mean it was going to happen. But I had a better chance for it going through Brutus first and him giving my case to Hulk before I had to go and plead my case. I was trying to influence the jury.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah.
With the man with no name here, after the match, after you win, a man, aka the master, would start screaming, Sullivan, Sullivan. He'd basically be yelling for you.
Yeah.
Later on, we find out it's King Curtis. But what'd you think about at this? Because you kind of exit through the crowd as you're like running, I guess, towards the master to try to find out who he is and what he wants. What'd you think about this crazy Dungeon of Doom beginning storyline?
Well, I knew where it was going. Okay, I knew what I was doing. I was sacrificing me to put everybody of Hogan's people in one group. Let's not spread this thing out.
Right.
Let's put it in one group. And one of the greatest, if not the greatest talkers of all times, is King Curtis. I mean, I've heard Don Morocco say that no one could come close. Dusty Rhodes told me this. Dusty loved Curtis. Hulk loved Curtis. I loved Curtis. I was a very dear friend of his. He was super. I learned so much from Curtis. Bruiser Brody said that Curtis was the greatest speaker of all time, so they were close. So Curtis wanted to do something. He told Hulk, he said he wanted one more trip around the Milky Way. So Hulk said, well, let's use Curtis. So I was glad it was Curtis. Was it cartoonish? Absolutely. Did I understand what I was doing? Yeah, I understood that up until that time, I've been a dead ass serious heel on the lines of the Sheik. Not saying I came close to it, but on copying him. And I knew for the betterment of the business that I'm going to do this because in the end, it's going to help him and help the company by turning heel. Once he sees that he believes in me, I think he'll understand that he has to turn heel. That was long in my mind right from the beginning.
Now, obviously, eventually, this is going to be the start of the Dungeon of Doom storyline, and we're going to build to that. But the next match on the show, Wahoo McDaniel defeats Dick Murdoch in about 6 minutes. This is a Legends match between Wahoo and Dick. This was shown in black and white during the pay-per-view telecast. For the match, Gordon Soley was on the call with Bobby the Brain Heenan to add to that old school aspect of the match. Was that just kind of a really different approach? And I know WB always tries to do that today with the Fiend and having it red and stuff, but that was kind of cool. A little bit of a throwback for the telecast.
I thought it was brilliant. Wahoo McDaniels and Dickie Murdoch. You don't appreciate when you're there at the time. Like a friend of mine just told me something that really stuck with me. He said, when you're having the time of your life, they should tell you it's the time of your life so you enjoy it more.
True.
John.
Yep,
John.
still here. Can you hear me?
Okay. When you work with, at the time, you've seen Murdoch work, you've seen Wahoo work, you've seen them work together. You don't appreciate the ability they had until years later. They had an incredible match, didn't they? I mean, you talk about chopping and whacking one another, so.
Wahoo was stiff, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah.
The next matchup, the Great Muta defeats Paul Orndorff in about 14 minutes. Muta, of course, was defending his IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. What do you think about this one? This is kind of Orndorff on the way towards retirement, kind of winding it down. Muta, obviously in the middle of the prime of his life, prime of his career, still a champ now today in Pro Wrestling Noah, which is crazy because he's about 58. But Muta here in New Japan, how's the relationship?
First of all, Paul Orndorff, in my opinion, was one of the top two heels of his era. He had a fifth gear like nobody has. If we have young wrestlers listening to this, pull up Paul Orndorff. No wasted motion. Terrific performer. But like you said, John, we got a relationship going now with New Japan. We're not going to screw that up. And I know Paul's a real professional, so he's going to make Muta look great. Paul was one of the toughest guys ever in our business. He's going to do the right thing, and he's going to make Muta look great. And it's a win for Muta with a huge name, a guy that drew a lot of money with Hulk Hogan.
True. Oh, nothing but positives. New Japan's got to be happy with that.
Yep.
The next matchup, Arn Anderson with Ric Flair defeats Alex Wright in about 11 minutes, 30 seconds. Arn retains his television championship here. Rebuilding Double A here, trying to build him back up, build a TV division. What's going on here?
With Arn, I don't think you have to ever rebuild Arn, but maybe you need sometimes to fill in a crack or put a little paint on something. Arn can turn it on in one night and rebuild himself. So it's just to showcase that he's still the bull of the woods against the young cock on the walk.
And I believe this is Alex Wright's first loss in WCW.
I'm almost sure you're right.
What was the thought process in having him be undefeated for a while, for several months?
Well, we had those tapes going into Germany. Now we got a German promoter that wants to get behind us because we got Alex Wright. Alex Wright's dad is English, and he was a big star in England and Germany. Steve Wright. And now we got a entertainment company wanting to promote wrestling in Germany. We didn't have that. They need a German wrestler. Let's get the best we can. Hey, and Alex Wright lost to one of the top heels after going undefeated. I always look a lot of times, John, like boxing. Do you know who Mac Foster was?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, during Foreman's reign, he was, I believe he won the Olympics. So if didn't, he won the silver medal. He was 23-0, 23 knockouts. He fought Jerry Quarry, his first big fight. He was a 7-1 favorite and got knocked out. It revived Quarry. They had more matches because of it. It wasn't going to hurt this kid to lose to Arn. It sets up a return match in Germany that he's going to get that win back.
I like it.
Yeah. So then we explain it to the company that's bringing us over. They started to think we're smart.
Yeah, good thing.
Yeah.
So the next matchup, Ming with Colonel Rob Parker fights Road Warrior Hawk to a double count out in about 5 minutes. This was set up earlier on the main event program. The no finisher, the double count out. What do you think?
Well, first of all, you got to do that. Not you got to do it, but you can't take the mystique off the Road Warriors. But I mean, I loved the Road Warriors. Two of my favorite guys of all times. But if it was a shoot, I bet the house, my car, my kids, everything on me. Okay, and I was always, till a certain time where pressure got too much, I was always respectful of the fact of who Ming was. And if it came from the top, it should go to the kids that don't even know who he is. And then, why did they do that? And then the guys tell them why, who Ming is. And some people should be able to not rest on their laurels, but be recognized for what they are.
So the double count keeps them both strong, right?
Yeah.
They both don't lose.
Yeah.
The next matchup, Sting defeats Big Bubba Rogers by submission with the Scorpion Deathlock in about 10 minutes. Good match here. These two always had good chemistry. Sting's going over.
Here's the thing. Bubba was wonderful. And Sting, as a young man, was very athletic. But when he worked with Bubba, like you just said, Bubba was such an athletic big guy. They just clicked. And if there was a movement that maybe Sting, as a young babyface, missed, Bubba covered it and you never saw it. I think they worked together. I'm going to say something, people are going to think I'm crazy. Next to Ric Flair, Sting worked with him the best.
You think? Over Vader, huh?
Yep. You're taking Vader because we know what Vader was. Bubba was a big, tough guy, but he didn't potato you.
Gotcha.
And he didn't have the notoriety that Vader did. And if we pushed it, that would have been a great match, Vader and Bubba.
Yeah, we talked about that a couple weeks ago when they had that awesome match at Slamboree 94 when he was the boss.
Right.
They had some great matches. Then again, Fall Brawl 95. It's a three-way with Sting involved as well, but Vader and Bubba always had great chemistry.
Yeah.
Now, the next matchup was the main event of the evening. Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage with Jimmy Hart and the Renegade defeat Ric Flair and Vader with Arn Anderson in about 19 minutes. Interesting thing here, we see somebody, we don't know who he is quite yet, is later be revealed to be the Giant, but he's in the crowd. He's kind of by the entranceway. What's up with this little tease?
Yeah. And JP, to be really honest, I don't think the legal particulars had been worked out. So we still wanted to get him on the show, but we didn't know if it was going to happen because he had a lawyer and he had an agent at the time, and there was some miscommunication on times. You know what I mean? It was nothing big, but we'll say we think he's going to sign Tuesday. Well, we didn't know if the agent was available on Tuesday. So if he wasn't available on Tuesday, he couldn't do it to the following Tuesday, so he would have missed the taping. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So we were covering ourselves to the best of our ability, I think.
Big plans for him? Did you know what he was going to be, who he
Yeah.
was going to be, all that stuff? It's going to be
Yeah.
Andre's son, everything like that?
Yeah, that was Hogan's whole thing. He came and laid it all out. I never liked the thing about him being the son. God,
Because he's
you know,
not because he's not really the son. You think it's kind of bullshit?
yeah, I mean, God, I think Paul is a wonderful talent, great guy, but there was only one Andre, and for Hulk, I don't know. I just didn't like it. He wasn't a son. I mean, it's okay for other guys to play son and brother, but not Andre. You know, that cartoon I told you about is nothing sacred. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. To me, Andre was sacred.
Yep. And they had him eventually, wearing the same singlet and everything else. So, I mean, they're
Right.
really pushing him along. Even the
Right.
name, obviously, the Giant, Andre the Giant. He was the giant.
Right.
So for this match, Hogan is going to pick up the win when Anderson accidentally hits Ric Flair, enabling Hogan to nail the leg drop and pin Flair. After the match, though, Flair, Vader, and Arn continue the attack on Hogan and Savage, leading to what you mentioned earlier. Savage father, Angelo Poffo, jumps the guardrail to come to the aid of his son, tries to rescue him. Flair, however, was able to beat up Poffo, put him in the figure four, and then, of course, Hogan and the Renegade were able to get Flair, Arn, and Vader out of the ring. And obviously, Savage is nuts at this point because Flair just beat up his father.
Right. Who he adored and
Yes.
came across as legit. Randy was terrific, you know. And, things, and Rick, that just worked out perfectly and really cemented the Flair Savage feud from then on.
To me, he was like, wow, okay, this just got personal. Like,
Yes.
wow, he just beat up his dad. Like, holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Flair and Savage always had great chemistry, but that just added another notch to it that kind of elevated the feud because, wow, like you could have an issue, but I mean, that's a big issue. He just beat up the guy's father in front of him. And then there's nothing he could do until boom makes the save and they skedaddle.
Right. Right.
What did you think about like Hogan in this whole thing as far as he needed to get the win over Flair, but then Flair's shooting with Savage? Do you think that downgraded Flair and Savage? That the fact that Flair lost, you know what I mean? Like Vader didn't want to take the loss there?
No, it wasn't Vader didn't want to take the loss. That was Hogan taking Rick because, first of all, Rick could get beat every night as long as he got his heat back. So at the end of the night, nobody realized that Rick had lost because
Right.
of what he did with Savage. And it set them off in a great direction. And it also set Hogan up that if they were under him, boy, he had the best undercard he possibly could have. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If it was him and Vader, Rick and Randy, boy, that's a pretty strong card for just two matches. You're starting out pretty good out of the gate.
Yeah. Awesome. Great co-main event, or if you will, or undercard. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So overall, I liked this show. I thought it was a good show. The end with Flair is great just because, like, wow, he got his heat back and then some, beating up Angelo Poffo. But what do you think about the show overall?
I give it a B plus, A minus, maybe stretching it, but I give it a B plus because of what you said. We accomplished the Savage Flair. We accomplished a nice little package. Then Hogan, Vader, Flair, Savage, and then you got Sting on the wings. So now you got a pretty beginning. When you start penciling stuff down, it looks pretty strong. You got 2.5 matches done.
With Vader, did you want him, make sure you kept him strong? Because obviously you're going to lead to Bash for the Beach eventually in a few months'
Yes.
time, and he's going to face Hogan in the main event.
Yes, because there was also Hogan actually talked about slipping Vader over at one time. So, that's why he picked Rick to do the job, because he knew Rick could do the job and not get hurt. And he also was thinking that if he worked with Vader, he didn't want Vader to have blemish on him from that match.
Right. And then, of course, the next pay-per-view will be Flair versus Savage at the Great American Bash, which will be the headline. Hogan will have the pay-per-view off, but just interesting where things are headed. And if Savage and Flair are headlining pay-per-view, they can still hold strong, even if Hogan's not on it.
Right. And especially that angle, that's going to really help.
Yes. So let's get into the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com.
Thank you very much, JP. Let's have a continued successful week.
Yes, awesome stuff. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in this week, and we'll see you right back here next week on Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. See you next week, folks.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.